Welcome again to the next episode of the Chi Life podcast. Today I have James Crompton as our special guest. James is an energy healer and an actor, a musician and a poet, and also the creator of quantum dance, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So James, could we maybe just start out by maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background, and the things that have led you to creating quantum dance. There might be a few things that sort of tie into that.
Cool, yeah. So I grew up in a thing called the School of Philosophy, and that was a kind of organization that explored a lot of different traditions from its sort of broad aspects of Shakespeare, even Plato, into also Advaita Vedanta, which is a sort of Indian tradition that comes through the Shankaracharya there. And they teach meditation as part of that. They also brought in things like Christianity, Taoism, Buddhism, and different aspects of all these different traditions into. So that's something that I grew up with.
It sounds like a really interesting sort of background, because I guess particularly in the modern day where lots of people are sort of drifting away from, I guess, what you'd think of as traditional religions. So a group that are drawing from multiple threads to come up with their own ideas of philosophy or spirituality. That sounds like a really interesting background.
Yeah. It was they called it practical philosophy. So it also incorporated mindfulness. And in fact, mindfulness wasn't really a buzzword at the time when I was young. And so mindfulness became a buzzword later on. But a lot of the things they teach under the umbrella of mindfulness are very similar to the exercises that you get that I learned as a child. And so I kind of grew up with that, and my parents had attended that their whole lives. That was the grounding that I kind of had exploring different traditions like that. And then I sort of branched off and went on my own path, and went into a thing called the Ashaya tradition. I eventually became went over to America and spent time there training to teach that. Didn't quite finish it. It was another form of meditation, if you like, although they didn't like to call it that. And then, but also through my ascension, which is the Ashaya tradition, was called the Ashaya's Ascension. So through that, I started getting back into creativity, and when I was at uni, I started getting back into drama and theatre and poetry, and picked up a guitar and started writing music. So there was that kind of, all my creativity always had a kind of spiritual basis behind it in a way.
And I think this seems to be a not uncommon thing, in that when people start to pursue whether you call it spiritual or sort of an energy path, where they start to really tune into the energy, that naturally creativity starts to come up to the surface, and you want to find a way to express it.
Yes.
It seems to be part of a natural process. As you tune into that energy, it's like, well, I guess creativity is part of life, right? And so and you start to want to express that more fully.
Essentially, yeah, that's what it is that life force bubbling, if you like. And so after I came back from that is when I learnt Reiki, which a friend of mine taught me. Did that for a while, had a few quite way out experiences with it. Eventually ended up going down the reconnective healing path, which was a guy, Dr. Eric Pearl, came to New Zealand and taught reconnective healing. So I learnt that from him. All the while I was doing this, I was also doing theatre. So within theatre there were movement classes and improvisation and a lot of improvisation around movement devising as well, devising classes, devising workshops. So that aspect too. And then also I started sort of early after I came back from Ascension, even maybe before, I started attending 5 rhythms dance classes. Really enjoyed those. They were kind of to me like a form of meditating while moving, so using movement as a form of meditation, and I really liked that aspect. And then from there I also tried other things, like eventually out of 5 rhythms recently there's been the movement of ecstatic dance, which you're obviously well familiar with, and also there were other dances. There was chakra dance, dance of awakening ecstatic dance. Also, contact improvisation is another form of dance that I found really interesting to explore, which explores the human contact, and also things like, most recently though, over the last few years, I've been doing a thing called Biodancer, which I draw a lot of inspiration from. And Biodancer, essentially, it's from a guy created by a guy called Rolando Toro, and he was Chilean, I believe. And it's like the dance of life, bio meaning life, dance, the dance of life. So it incorporates a whole lot of different aspects of things like psychology and movement and spirituality, and they have all these modules created around that. And out of that came my desire to create a system of my own that kind of incorporated all of these things, while also another thing that I got involved with was shamanism to a degree. So I've been listening to a channel called Lee Carroll, who's quite a well-known channel. I went to Peru and I went on a tour around the Sacred Valley with Lee and his wife Monica Muriani and a shaman named Nicholas Pauka. So also incorporating things like the notion that dance is a really high vibe kind of activity, and those kind of vibrations are really good for manifesting. And so using dance as a form of manifestation in a way, essentially like the way people did rain dances, for example, like by incorporating the energy of dance to use it as a form of manifestation. Also, as a sense of, I wanted to incorporate other things like astrology and numerology and aspects of Mayan dream spell, which is another form of numerology that comes from the Mayan tradition, and human design, and just so the way that I found was that came to me was the best way of doing this, was to find a common thread that somehow linked all these things together, and that ended up being numbers. So in quantum dance, I use numbers as the umbrella under which I sort of bring all this information together, and then essentially we dance the information, if you like, in a way of grounding it into our bodies and making it a sort of practical reality. in a sense.
Okay, so drawing on lots and lots and lots of different influences,
Yeah.
right from your early upbringing and practical philosophy
Yeah.
through to a few different spiritual paths and mindful paths and working with energy,
Mm.
and then specifically these different dance and movement traditions,
Yeah.
to bring that all together into one practice.
Yeah.
That's a lot to put
It's
together.
quite ambitious. So
Yeah.
it's kind of the culmination of I mean, initially quantum dance started, the idea for quantum dance started with me going to ecstatic dance and literally getting a sore leg and starting doing energy healing while I was dancing, and then actually finding that I quite enjoyed doing energy healing while I was dancing. But it seemed so initially I was going to just get people who'd done my energy courses and you know, do quantum dance being just energy healing while you're dancing.
Right, yeah.
But somehow it morphed into
Expanded
into,
a bit bigger.
into something bigger.
So what is it that you hope? So there's an energy healing component, but there's all these other parts. What is it, if you could kind of sum up, put together, what is it that you hope people get out of dancing in this way, bringing all of this together rather than just dancing? Like you're bringing other stuff in. What do you hope they get out of that?
A lot of things. Firstly, community and connection, human connection. I also bring aspects of like workshops that I've done at various festivals, and like eye gazing, for example. You know, and that's a big part of Be a Dancer, is that, as well as that human connection. You know, we explore themes in life, things like balance or you know, even within the different astrological signs, there's certain themes that we might pick up and explore through dance. So life lessons, practical uses for life, but also that for me, dance is a really high vibe activity, and just that pure unadulterated joy that you get out of dancing, but using that on another level where you can use it to create, you know, for example, using it. So we might, for example, do a dance around manifesting your dream holiday or your dream job or your dream relationship or something like that.
So bringing a lot of intention into it.
Yeah, dancing with intention.
So by having that intention, they then work with their energy through the dance, which then allows their energy to process and work towards their intention.
Yeah,
so it's a way to activate that intention and bring it out.
Yeah, like if you're sometimes also using dance as a form of prayer, if you like.
Lots of cultures do that, don't they? Historically, that's been a big thing. Probably not so common these days.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing to bring in.
But not just that, not exclusively that. Like it's also dancing for, you know, we might do a dance around the sacral chakra, which might be about doing an improvised belly dance, for example, or we might do an improvised tango using the fire element, because it's quite a sort of fiery, intense, passionate dance, and about that the connection with the eyes, for example. So, and about having fun as well, and play, you know, and all those aspects.
Okay, cool. So lots of things coming together, lots of different focuses that you can have within the dance. Like you've said, it could be about something intentionally manifesting something. It could be about working with different elemental energies. It could be working with the different chakras. Lots of different things that you could be focusing on. What then does a typical, I suppose maybe there's not a typical one, but an example of what does a quantum dance session actually look like? What if people turn up to a quantum dance session, what are they going to do? How does it start? What happens after that? What does that look like?
Okay, so initially we sort of gather, we talk about the number. So at the moment I've been laying the number out with cushions on the ground just to get people the shape of the number, because the shape of the number in numerology is actually also to do with what the number means. So for example...
Well, it makes sense that when people were deciding on symbols to represent something, they chose shapes that represented that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I had looked into a bit of the history around how they created the shapes of numbers, and there's an evolvement that happens through the shapes. But the notion is that, for example, if a number's got more curvy, then that's a more feminine kind of energy, whereas if it's more straight lines, then it's a more kind of masculine energy.
So 1 is quite masculine,
Yeah.
2 becomes more feminine,
Yeah.
3 also feminine.
Well, yeah.
4 becomes quite masculine again.
Yeah, so 4's a number, yeah.
5's kind of a balance of both. It's got some straights and curves.
Yeah, and literally because 5's in the middle of between 1 and 9, so it's kind of, and 6 again is a feminine number. Yeah, so that's quite potent in numerology. The shape of the number, it gives, it sort of helps with the definition of it in a sense. But
so right as they start, they come in and there's a visual representation of the number that helps to get them into the focus.
Yeah, I even get them to sit on the number.
Okay,
so sit somewhere on the number. So then we'll talk about the number, do a little brainstorm of what people think about the number and what people associate with that number. A lot of times, people at this stage, people haven't really had too much experience with thinking about numbers, and so even that initial step of creating a conversation around what do numbers mean to people is quite interesting.
But because even if they haven't thought about it much consciously, we all do have some cultural or personal association with numbers. Things like 2's companies, 3's a crowd. Or, 7
chakras,
7 chakras, 7 deadly sins, 7 heavens.
7 heavens, yeah.
There's these different
7 saintly virtues as well.
Right. These different associations that we have, even if they're not
7 days of the week.
True. Even if they're not to the front of our consciousness. They're in there from the different things we've been exposed to.
Yeah. So that's what we do, is we talk about the numbers and sort of bring up aspects of the numbers, and that will be, so we run through a whole lot of different things in association with the numbers. So it's quite a lot of information to process, and it's almost like can be a bit overwhelming because there's so much really when you look at a number. There's a huge amount of stuff that can be associated with that number.
You might just start thinking, it's just like counting, but then when you really think about it, wow, there's a lot of associations.
Yeah, totally. So that's where I bring in the other stuff that I've been talking about, which is astrology. For example, the first sign in astrology is considered to be Aries. You'd think it would be Capricorn, but actually because it's spring, Aries is considered the first sign in astrology, and the first house in astrology is the house ruled by Aries. So and so forth. And so then you've got also in Mayan dream spell, you got the first house, and that is the red dragon. There's also tones within Mayan dream spell, so there's 20 sort of signs, and then there's 13 tones as well. So we go through the tones and the signs, and then we got human design. You've got lines. So the first line would be the investigator, and then then the first day of the week, for example, is considered actually Sunday, named after the sun. The second being Moon Day or Monday, Moon Day. And so they have, and Tuesday is Tuesday, which Tu was the god of war in Norse mythology, I believe.
Sun, the moon, and then go to war.
War, yeah.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah. So and then the first month is January, which was named after Janus, or Janus might be in
Depends if you're South American or not.
yeah, well, it's Roman, so maybe I can't remember.
I think they say a hard J. in
Yeah,
Roman.
I think perhaps they
Latin.
do. Yeah,
Roman.
yeah,
Latin.
Janus.
Yeah.
So Janus was the god of openings and closings, which makes a lot of sense in terms of it being the
beginning,
first month
well,
of
an
the
end
year.
of the old, beginning of the new year.
Yeah, exactly. So we talk about the number, the shape of the number also, and all the connecting threads under the number. So you'll find actually when we do this massive brainstorm across all these different kind of traditions, there's a lot of common themes that that interact with each other. And that's one of the things that I try to incorporate in my healing business as well. The sign for my healing business is a kind of tree of life, and I use that in my poetry books as well. There's a tree on the front of all my poetry books, because for me it's about all branches of the same tree.
And the interconnectedness is
Yeah.
part of that. That you
Yeah.
you have a branch, but it's not disconnected from the other branch. They're all part of a greater whole.
Yeah. When in the past, growing up, there was a lot of different traditions that I became a part of, and a lot of them were like, our way is the only way, our way is the best way, our way is the fastest way, ours is the most grounded, practical way, or whatever. So they've all got, notions that their way is somehow better than the other way. But what and the other notion was that by digging in, if you're digging for water or gold or whatever, then you only dig in one place.
Right.
So that the further down you dig, then you'll finally strike water. But what I've found, or the notion that there's only one path up the mountain, I suppose as well. There's a long straight path or the straight and narrow path. What I've found by exploring all these different traditions is that they're actually all interconnected, and they all join up under the ground.
So an analogy I sometimes use when talking about different practices, because there's value in going deep. There's value in spending a lot of time with one practice, because if you don't go deep enough, you often don't really get the value out of it.
Yeah.
But there's not only value in going deep, there's also value in going wide. And if you look at, there's different types of trees that have different types of root systems.
Yeah.
But a lot of the really big trees, they do a combination of those things. The roots go deep, but they also go wide. And if you have both of those things, you get a really strong, healthy tree that's really resilient to the conditions around it, that's able to draw from nutrients and moisture really easily.
Yeah.
And you get a really solid grounding, much more so than the ones that just go deep. Those ones that just go deep can sometimes be uprooted quite easily.
Yeah.
The ones that just go wide often rely very much on the other trees around them to keep them safe from the wind and stuff. And if they don't have that, they also can be uprooted easily. The ones that go deep and wide have a really strong base.
I love that. That's a great analogy. Yeah, it's
Cool.
really cool. I like that. Yeah. In fact, what the image that I have for my business is a tree branching out very wide, but it's also got the mirror reflection under the ground.
Yeah, nice. Cool.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So you have the brainstorming.
Yeah.
And you draw together the common threads of all these different things. What happens next?
So then we usually start with a kind of circle, which will introduce the themes of the numbers and just sort of feeling into the music, and we start moving around. And then usually I got that kind of opening sense. I mean, that's in a lot of different traditions, is that opening circle, just to connect with everybody and ground,
Share a common space, a common energy.
Yeah, often also, so I didn't mention, before we do the circle, we often do a few warm-up exercises around the number. So we might do, for example, if the number is 1, we might do the mantra for the first chakra, like which is Lam, for example. So we might sound Lam together, and also do mudras, which are connected through yoga as well, for the chakra. If the number was 2, which is very connected to water and also the moon, I might do, if the day that we do it on is around the moon, the full moon cycle or the new moon cycle, we might do a prayer around the full moon. Or, I mean, in the future, I'm even looking at incorporating things like cacao ceremony into it, where we do some intentions around, you know, the new moon and the full moon. So the number 2, for example, is very much connected to the moon, and so we might do, like I say, a prayer around the moon, or we might do some moon salutes, which is a form of yoga. On the 1, we might do sun salutes because it's connected to the sun. Sunday, moon day,
Right.
Again, 1 and 2.
And there on Tuesday, do you have a fight?
Well, we do bring aspects of that in, like the 3 also in
Not actual fighting, I'm sure, but maybe some of that combative energy.
Yeah. Well, the 3s in numerology is considered quite a sort of competitive number, I believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the 3rd chakra is about sort of taking your place in the world and purpose and confidence and strength. So there's a lot of connecting threads. So Tu being the god of war. So yeah, and the 3rd chakra is sort of Aries and Scorpio, so the Marsian kind of energy. So we might incorporate that into a dance that's based around, we might even do a sort of improvised haka or something like that.
Yeah. A war dance, sort of inspired movement where it's got that,
that
strong
energy. Or a dance around polarity and integrating polarity, because the 3 in numerology, for example, you get the 1 and the 2, which is the masculine and the feminine, and then you get the 3, which is creation out of the polarity. So you get the masculine and the feminine, and then you get the baby, and you got the child. So in the song, 3 is a magic number, which you kindly passed on to me. It talks about the family. So you've got the family. So so it's creation out of the polarity, and that's also in the mind dream spell aspect as well. They talk about those themes too in that. So there's a lot of crossover within these traditions, and so we might do a dance around polarity, for example, or that might be one that we do in the number 2. There's crossovers also between over the numbers too.
Sure, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Polarity doesn't go away.
Right?
No, it just starts to take different forms as it progresses in different ways.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, and then, for example, if we move, we also might have a specific focus for a class, for example. The other thing is with ecstatic dance, for example, you dance a wave, and what I'm trying to incorporate into this is dancing throughout the journey of the quantum dance that we dance a sort of journey that's based around the shape of the number. So if it's a 3, then it might be a double wave, for example, somehow connected to the shape of the number. If it's a 2, it might go sort of on a wave and then a kind of flat line.
At the bottom, a low, sort of, steady.
Flat lines at the end, or kind of, so incorporating the shape of the number somehow into the journey as well.
Okay.
And a 1, it just goes straight up
and up and up and up.
or straight down, I suppose. But you've also, in the 1, you can also have those elements as well.
Yeah.
The bottom and the
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, trying to incorporate a bit of that in a sense of using the ecstatic dance, the way that the wave or the shape of the number. So yeah, and for example, I might have where the number stops or changes into another kind of, like the 5, for example, or the 2, where it gets to the bottom of the 2 and then we go in a straight line. I might have at that point a kind of break in the middle where people lie down, and one of the things I've been doing is incorporating chakra music, sort of chakra sound healing. So people lie down in the middle and just sort of have a moment to be surrounded by the noises that are associated with that second chakra that are meant for healing. They're kind of sort of crystal bowl, but also I think binaural beats, or they kind of bring in healing sounds for the second chakra or the third chakra. Or we might have a specific focus where, if say we're dancing the number 4, one of the things I was looking at was dancing, because there's 4 Harry Potter houses.
Okay, a bit of a modern cultural association.
Yeah.
Well, and culture changes.
Yeah.
As culture changes, it can't help but be connected to the more ancient things. So, but it does develop and take different forms as we go on. So why not have some modern influences?
Totally. And if you look at the 4 Harry Potter houses and look a bit further into them, you'll notice that J.K. Rowling probably had that grounding in those kind of, certain aspects. So they'd bring in elements, so that the houses might be connected to certain animals, for example, certain elements like air, fire, earth, water. So we might dance the elements, the 4 elements and the 4 Harry Potter houses, and then we might do the tarot. So tarot is another thing that I like to incorporate. We're looking at the major arcana and the minor arcana. So there's often themes across the 2s, for example, or the 1s in the minor arcana, and then you've got the figure that's the tarot card for the major arcana, and incorporating that into the dance somehow.
Okay, so to recap. They come in, there's a visual representation of the number. You then talk about, you have a brainstorming and then talk about different associations from lots of different sources that we associate with the number. You do some exercises maybe related to energy centers, so it could be chanting, could be mudras, could be whatever that may be, to get people prepared. Yeah. And then they start to dance, but there's still lots to incorporate. Do you have different exercises that people do, like different dances, or is it just one big dance? How does that work?
No, so the exercises are generally, they're kind of guided.
So you give instructions, like now we're going to do this.
Yeah. And so, and we talk about how that relates to what we discussed at the beginning. So that we're grounding the information that we discussed at the beginning, because that information is for the most part up in your head. But when you dance it, the notion
into your body.
That you get it into the cells in your body, even your DNA, and so it becomes part of you. And actually, they say that our memory is actually not contained in our brains, because it's actually there was an experiment that I was trying to reference there, where I think it was either someone's was brain dead or heart dead or something like that. But anyway, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But anyway, that that our memory is not in our brains, but in the cells of our body. So essentially, for someone who's lost their memory, it's not that their memory's gone. The memory is still there, contained in their bodies. It's just that the neural pathways
That help them to access that memory and make it conscious.
are blocked somehow. And so sometimes, for example, you might ask the same question in a different way, and it might access a different neural pathway, and you might be able to get to the same information through a different route.
So by dancing, you can bring out that memory, or equally, you can maybe put in some more useful memory or information.
Well, it's about sort of grounding that information into the body. It's also, because there's so much information, it's also about creating a different way of remembering it. In a sense, by dancing it, you create a connection to that.
Yeah, you have an embodied memory.
Oh, I remember when we were talking about balance and relationships and how there needs to be a bit of give and take in relationships, and I'm coming up against this in my relationship at the moment, for example, and so I remember dancing how we sort of decided how far we wanted to, how close we wanted to bring our partner to us, and how comfortable we were at this particular time, and in terms of how close they were. So we might dance a theme around balance, for example, and then that they can integrate that knowledge into a situation in their life, for example.
Well, it sounds like there's so much that can be within a quantum dance session. How do you end the session? So you go through this process, working with all the information, and then dancing in different ways to integrate the information. You've mentioned that the pattern might have some waves in it, or depending on the shape of the number. How do you bring that all to a close at the end?
So usually I try and, depending on the number, so again, but we try to usually have a circle at the end, again, and then we might also again sort of close it with a similar thing that we did at the beginning, like a mantra, or, for example, in the 4, I might have used the 1 even. There's a shamanic prayer that I incorporate, which is to do with the 4 directions. 6 actually, because there's also up and down.
Yes, it's actually very important.
Sometimes even 7, because they also
the center.
Talk about So like 4 elements, for example, but there can be 5 in some traditions. So
some there's even more. 5's quite common. But,
and even 7 chakras nowadays. They're talking about 13 chakras, or even 108. So so I try and bring us back into a circle at the end. Also, one of the things I love from biodanza was this thing called the ceremony of embraces, and that was just a way of connecting with people at the end. Where we've got to a point. Notion is that you slowly build up to the point where you become more comfortable with each other, to the point that you're able to kind of give someone a hug.
Right. Well, because in our modern lives, often we're not necessarily comfortable to do that straight away.
Yeah.
But after you've spent time dancing with each other, I guess that can break down some of those barriers.
Yeah. Well, it's said that we need. It's been said that we need 8 hugs a day, and it's really good for your immunity. And so that's one of the things I really loved about biodanza, was the ceremony of embraces, and kind of try, if I can incorporate that somewhere in, then I will, if it's appropriate to where it's sort of featured in the number. And
have a hug after you've gone to war.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, and it's also about sort of being where you're at as well. So if you're not in that space where you don't, you're not, and taking responsibility for where you're at. So if you're not,
so if someone doesn't want to hug, they don't have to. There's no pressure. Everyone has to hug each other.
And so there might be someone that you might want to hug for longer than another person, but they might not want to hug you. So it's about everyone taking responsibility for where they're at as well, and that's about boundaries but then the circle generally at the end, and then we sort of have maybe a popcorn of one thing you like, one thing that you love from the session, one thing that you found challenging, what you'll take away from it, one exercise that you really enjoyed from it.
Cool. So what kind of music do you play for this? So there's all these different things going on. What kind of music do you use?
Quantum music.
Quantum music, okay.
So in a sense, the reason I call it quantum dance, for me, quantum means multi-dimensional. So working on many different layers.
And maybe a layer beyond the ordinary layer.
Yeah, exactly. And so with that, I incorporate all the music from anywhere that kind of works for whatever exercise. But, so it might be I have my own influences and probably am slightly more drawn towards certain types of music. But, if there's a exercise about the third chakra, for example, and it's about sort of standing up and finding your purpose and standing up for your rights and that kind of thing.
You might play some Beastie Boys.
Yeah, exactly. Fight for your right to party.
Who knew that the Beastie Boys would eventually be used in a conscious, intentional dance?
Exactly. Well, that's where, for me, embracing the shadow aspects is really important. And children, for example, one of the great things about kids is they're really curious, but they also pass through emotions really quickly. Adults, we tend to have been told that our emotions are not okay. And as we grow up, this conditioning surrounds us, where you're not allowed to cry, you're not allowed to be angry. They're negative emotions, you can't show them. So when we have a whole lot of anger, we just carry it around with us and shove it down, and so we don't actually express it. But if you can do that in a dance and sort of do a dance around anger, where you're kind of releasing all the pent-up anger that you've got and throwing it into the center of the earth, for example, then that can be a very healthy way of kind of releasing the stale energy and expressing that energy.
Rather than letting it get stuck inside.
Yeah.
Because the emotion itself isn't unhealthy. This is something I talk about a lot when I'm teaching Qigong, because it ties in with different things, where people have these preconceptions about emotions. And one emotion is good, another emotion is bad.
Yeah.
All of the emotions are good and healthy, natural parts of life.
Yeah.
But it's how we then handle that. If we let it get stuck inside, whatever the emotion is, there's a good chance that it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
But if we experience it, process it, release it, and then that leaves us free to continue with the flow of energy in our life.
That's exactly it. And my dad always used to talk about anger as being love that's been held back. So all the emotions are essentially just love. And in the
that's a nice way to think of it.
Yeah. And if you think also in for example, the Hawkins scale, they rate emotions on the scale from 0 to 1,000, and anger is sort of still in the shadow aspect below 200, but you need to move through. Fear is even lower, and then shame and fear, and then you move up into anger. I think it is around 150 or something, might be 100. But you need to move through anger to get to willingness.
The next stage, and the next stage, and the next stage.
And then, So, and in the Vedic tradition, anger, sometimes you need anger for movement. So rajas is probably the emotion, the guna that's associated with anger, but it's also, rajas is the movement guna. So in order, you have to get frustrated with the status quo
to change it.
To change it, yeah. And so anger, in a sense, creates movement and change. For example, when there's a revolution, that's in society, and huge amounts of change happening at a sort of national level, then that's created through that people being frustrated with the status quo. And so, these are all parts of the whole system of life, in a sense. And so it's about being accepting of all of that in a way, but doing it in a way that's healthy rather than... Yeah.
That's the key, how we deal with it. Do we process and release that in a healthy, constructive way?
Yeah.
Because it can be harmful, right? If we don't use that energy in a healthy way. And dance is a very healthy. You're not going to hurt anyone else, hopefully, with your dancing,
Yeah.
A good way to release things. And so I guess you bring in all sorts of genres and styles of music that fit with that, and so people can process and experience things in different ways.
Yeah, like I'll bring in, one of my desires too is to introduce people to music that they haven't heard as well, that I have found, new music and slightly quirky music. I even write my own music as well, so sometimes I might throw one of my songs in there just to see how it goes down. But
nice.
I've got this song called "The Lonely Song," which was quite good for the number one.
Okay. Yeah.
Which just threw in there, but trying to introduce people to friends music, or music that they haven't heard, and world music and things like that. Even throwing in, I might throw a Susan Boyle song next to a Metallica song or something like that.
Yeah. Interesting combination.
Or ABBA and I don't know, just but also Lord of the Dance or something like that, or classical music like the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies, or the Four Seasons, for example, or tribal, because it's quantum, so it's everything basically.
All the different vibrations and rhythms,
exactly.
And they all come together.
Yeah, so bringing them all in, and not being welcoming and inclusive of everything, rather than kind of, that's what it means to me. Rather than sort of shutting off aspects.
Yeah.
My notion is that sometimes, if we hear certain music and we're offended by it, or kind of it irritates us, for example, that maybe there's part of us that is kind of identifying with that music. So and that's part of us that might be unhealed, for example. There might be some healing that's going on. I'll often, funnily enough, when I go around festivals and I do energy healing, one of the things about the festival environment is there's a whole lot of music and sounds around. So you think people would assume that you need silence for energy healing, but actually what I find is when I'm doing energy healing on someone on the table, suddenly this song will play, and it will be from somewhere in the festival, and it just seems to be the right moment that song comes out and seems to be somehow related to that person who's on the table at the time and the process that they're going through at that particular moment. And that's what the quantum field is really all about, is that we're all kind of in this big massive soup, and everything's interconnected. And so,
Speaking of sounds, we just had a helicopter go past. Just
does
coming
that mean
through.
we're winding down?
No, I don't know. It's very relevant talking about different sounds occurring in the environment. You may or may not hear this on the recording because, of course, we do sort of tidy up the audio. But you might hear it was quite a loud helicopter. Very appropriate for what you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, or you know, another thing I get when I'm doing healing on someone, some people might start walking past and a snippet of their conversation might be relevant or stand out while I'm doing the healing. It might be relevant to that person, or someone might be screaming in the session next door, and it's kind of like it's sort of connected to the person that I'm working on. But
yeah, well, I guess when you think about it, you could consider the whole festival to be a pretty quantum experience with so many different things all going on and all coming together.
Yeah.
And a lot of people find festivals they can be quite a transformational experience for people just to attend a festival. And so maybe in a similar way with your quantum dance, bringing all these different things together, maybe that can become something that's quite transformational for someone to go through and work through these different things all in one space.
Well, that's what I'm hoping from it also. So going through a range of emotions as well, even through the dances. So some of the exercises some people find quite challenging, and it's about embracing sometimes aspects of yourself that you're uncomfortable with. For example, part of the 3 is being the party animal, or that they like to be the sort of life of the party. And so for people who aren't,
that's an uncomfortable thing if that's not how you typically are.
So having to do that, you know, having to dance in the middle of a circle, you know, when we were kids, how you dance in the middle of the circle. So we get to, and with people cheering you on though, so there's a supportive background. Sorry, I hope that didn't muck up the sound. But also, I wanted to add also that people also have a very fixed notion, for example, about astrology or numerology. But within numerology, you have your life path number. So I'm a 32-5 in numerology, which has the 3 and the 2 and the 5. But you also have your heart's desire or soul urge, sometimes it's called, which is to do with your day. So my day is 15, which adds up to a 6, and it's got the 1 and the 5 and the 6. Then your name adds up to a number, so each name adds up to, so James is 14 or 5, and so 5 is the number of freedom or movement. And then,
so you're not a one-dimensional number person, you've actually got multiple influences.
Yeah, my whole name adds up to 11, Same with astrology, you've got and I personally, I go with Vedic astrology because I've just looked at both and find that to be more resonant with me, but it's you can sort of incorporate the same system that you do in Western astrology. So you have planets in each of the different signs and each of the different houses as well. So you might have your sun in Leo, you might have your ascendant in Virgo, you might have your moon in Capricorn, you might have your Venus in Gemini, or so there's the notion that that we're just one star sign. We're actually multi-dimensional beings, you know, and there's influences that are kind of energies that are influencing us from many different angles at any one time. We're not just we're not linear. We're not just simple kind of black and white. It's about all the colors of the spectrum. Even the chakra system, for example, is connected to the colors of the rainbow and the musical notes. For example, there's 7 musical notes, starting off with C in the base chakra, red, the color red for the base chakra, orange, yellow. So it's this colors of the rainbow all connected. Yeah. And I also think the 7 deadly sins or the 7 heavenly virtues can be related in some way to those chakras as well, in a sense, you know, as being sort of, I don't like the word sin as such, but, you know, just sort of things that we can, you know, take another look at.
Yeah. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you would like to tell us about quantum dance?
That at the moment I'm doing it at Kawe Purapura.
That's
So
good. You'll probably do it at some other places at some point as well.
Yeah,
I
I'm
expect.
hoping to potentially take it to festivals, and yeah, I'm really building it at this stage. So
So it's still evolving and developing.
It's still evolving.
So you can get in at the early stages. If you get in now, you can be like, I was there before.
I was there before it became quantum. Yeah. So yeah, just try getting people along to come and experience something different, and everyone who's come, I think, has really enjoyed it. I'd like to get more people along, obviously, in this early stage.
That
Sometimes
group dynamic to work together.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to sort of sometimes get something new out there that people have never heard of, and try and explain what it is before they come along somehow, to somehow get them along without, I don't know. So this is really great. I'm really grateful for this.
Hopefully lots of people will now have a bit of an understanding of what it is.
Yeah.
And a lot of them might not necessarily be nearby. Some of them will be nearby, might come to Kawe Purapura. Some of them will be overseas, but maybe they'll bring you to them. You never know.
Yeah.
Bring James along, get him to do some quantum dance wherever you are. That could be fun.
I could always come to a town near you.
And it does sound very much like something that people probably really need to try.
Yes.
Because there's all this different stuff. Fascinating to hear about it.
Yeah.
But to really try it for themselves and say, wow, how does that all work together? So it'd be great if you are somewhere. So Kawapura is in Auckland, New Zealand. If you're somewhere around here or visiting, what we'll do is in the description and the notes for this episode, as we normally do, we'll have some links how you can contact James. So you've got a website, you've got Facebook, you've got Instagram, you've got a YouTube.
Yes, yeah.
So through any of those, you'll be able to find a way to get in contact with him, and then maybe find out like when he's next doing something, or maybe if he's doing some quantum dance somewhere else as well.
Yeah, so I don't have a quantum dance specific site. It's under my Jivana Quantum Healing and Consultation umbrella at the moment.
But you put information about it on that site?
I post events on the Facebook site. So yeah, if you want to hear about when the next quantum dance event is, go to my Jivana Quantum Healing and Consultation Facebook site, or the Instagram site sometimes as well. But also you can look up quantum dance as an event on Facebook, because that'll... Yeah.
And you probably have an email address on your website or something if they want to contact you directly.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And they might be interested in some of the other work that you do as well, and they can get in touch with you for that.
Yeah. The other thing is I try and often match the number with the particular day that we're dancing the number. So if we're dancing on the 16th of October, that would be 1 and 6, which would be a 7, or we might use the whole number of the life, which is the life path number of the day. So for example, the 5th of the 11th, 2022 would be 5 plus 11, which is 2, 7 plus 6 for 2022 is 13, which adds up to a 4. Okay. So that would do 4.
Lots of maths
On the
required,
4
but
day,
James
yes.
does it for you.
Yes, do all the maths. And I can also do numerology charts and astrology. I do Vedic astrology charts for people too. So if people are interested in those aspects as well, and mind dream spell and human design, sort of tapping into that as well.
Cool. Awesome. Well, look, it's been great having you on the podcast, James. A really interesting interview that brings so many different things together. I'm sure people listening have found it interesting as well. And hopefully some of them will come along and try out some of it as well.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope it wasn't too quantum.
Well, how can something be too quantum, right? How can you be too quantum?
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.